If I had to pick one event in either the late 19th or early 20th century to sum up China's relationship with other nations, I would have to pick the Boxer Rebellion. No, the rebellion had nothing to do with the adorable dog breed. Boxers were a name that people from other countries called members of a particular secret society in China who practiced the art of boxing and calisthenics and who are believed to descend from a secret society who had problems with the Qing dynasty in the past. Their original goal was to destroy the dynasty and Westerners who were privileged while living in China. So the Boxer Rebellion was a peasant uprising from 1899 to about 1901, which started because packs of young men were attacking Chinese Christians and foreign missionaries in the northern part of China. The Chinese people who had recently become Christian received privileges because the foreign missionaries had sort of leaned on local officials to side with the Chinese Christians, very often lower-class citizens, in terms of lawsuits and even local land disputes. The Boxers burned churches and the homes of foreigners in the capital city of Beijing, and they murdered Chinese citizens they suspected to be Christian on sight. The Empress even ordered them to kill all foreigners. The German minister, along with other foreign ministers and their family and staff, were murdered alongside hundreds of Chinese Christians, both in their quarters, their living quarters, and the Roman Catholic Cathedral, which was located in Beijing. Finally, in early June, an international relief effort of about 2,100 men was dispatched, and this force included Russians, Japanese, Italian, British, and American forces. Things began to get really serious when in 1900 there were citizens of Beijing, or at least people who lived there, who were held hostage for 55 days. Now, before this hostage situation, the Chinese government was not really clear on whether these young men were criminals or some kind of loyalist patriots. So once the hostage situation occurred, the rebellion was officially supported by the state, and now focused on trying to drive all the foreigners, including Americans, British, and Germans, and the rest of the countries I mentioned, away from China. Now, the hostage situation included Americans and a lot of Japanese, which is probably why it was supported by the state. So the conflict eventually became a clash between members of the Qing ruling family and the foreign forces, and eventually the Qing fled Beijing. The conflict ended in 1901 in September when the Qing signed the Boxer Protocol, which was a kind of treaty. The treaty basically said that the Chinese needed to pay exorbitant costs to compensate for the loss of their enemies' lives, damaged goods, and property. Notice the Chinese did not receive any kind of reimbursement like that. However, the Chinese, or rather the Qing, received something pretty valuable: the approval of the foreign forces for them to continue ruling. The less of two evils, I guess. Because this was decided upon outcome, both the Qing and the foreign forces painted the Boxers as rebels and anti-dynastic, and the Qing tried to get people to forget that they were involved and had supported these people. So, because of this, the rebellion is often misunderstood outside the political boundaries of China. For instance, I'd be willing to argue it wasn't really a rebellion because the Boxers were supporting their own government. They just weren't supporting the foreign invaders. However, I'd like to note that foreigners were not the only target. Most of the deceased ended up being Chinese citizens who had converted to Christianity, and also the missionaries. The Boxers wanted life to continue as it had done, which is why I think this really sums up a lot about foreign relations in China. China wanted to be not insulated. They did a lot of trading, but they had a system that they felt worked for them, and Westerners were trying to get in and change it in order to make a profit from them. But the Boxers perceived the influence of Christianity as destructive, and they blamed the religion for both natural calamities and even the state of the economy.